Your superpower is the ability to listen to people, because I believe that the significant issues that we're facing in both the corporate and social universe around us relies upon us closing the gaps.
Maybe we don't understand the word empathy, right? So
yeah, absolutely. This is why I do this every day.
Mimi Nicklin.
Mimi Nicklin.
Mimi Nicklin.
I'm Mimi Nicklin.
Mimi Nicklin is an empathy guru and a business coach. Now, she believes that empathy is a critical skill.
The awareness of empathy, of our need for shared connectivity, as our need to understand each other as human beings, has definitely gone up.
And fundamentally, from that moment on, my life changed. To be empathized with literally creates longevity. So when people in the workplace feel seen and heard, they have less stress in the brain. Fundamentally, that connection between listening to someone and their performance is a direct line.
Is that something we could teach?
Yeah, it's hard to find, hard to master, and hard to maintain. Because empathy is the skill set, not an emotion. And when people ask me, what's your tips for, success? I think it's two things. I think it's...
Gladiators, welcome back. Today I have a very special guest from far, far away. Normally my guests are in the studio, but this young lady is in Malaysia and I'm honored to have her here. Mimi, and I'm going to Nicklin. Mimi Nicklin, welcome to the arena, and it's an honor to have you here with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here from far, far away.
Thank you. So what's it like in, whereabouts in Malaysia are you?
I'm in Kuala Lumpur. Okay. So I used to live in Dubai, so I know your hometown very well, or at least where you are now. And I spend a significant amount of time.
What's the weather like right now in Kuala Lumpur?
Kuala Lumpur is a very peaceful place.
What's
so that's why I live here.
Weather like?
Very, very calm, very peaceful, very tolerant part of the world. And compared to that hustle bustle of Dubai, I come to Dubai probably every 3 months. And I come into town and I work 17-hour days and I feel like I never stop. And then I get back here and I'm like, so it's a perfect balance from that speed of cities like Dubai. KL has a lot of progress, a lot of development, but somehow it's a little calmer over here.
I was in China last week and they said that the second tallest building is in Kuala Lumpur. Is it finished and built now?
They're building it at the moment. It's nearly finished. I think it's called the Merdeka Tower.
Right.
So yeah, it's nearly finished. It's a beautiful skyline. It's not quite like Dubai's, but it's a beautiful skyline.
I've been many times. I loved it. I used to go to is it Penang?
Yeah.
Penang. Yeah, I used to go to for about 10 years. Every year I went to Penang. It's really good.
Yeah. Look, it's a great part of the world, and as someone who is very right-brained, creative person, I need that calm to create. And that's one of the reasons I left Dubai, actually, is that Dubai, for me personally, is a great place to do business. But for me to create in Dubai, I find that very hard because it's just incredible. So fast and so noisy and so always on, that to actually settle and, write a book, create content, come up with stories, I find that hard in the hustle and bustle of Dubai. But here I feel like I have the space to create.
I get it. It's obviously very in touch with your feelings and emotions and your thought process, because right now I'm traveling a lot and I feel I get that when I leave Dubai. But I have to keep coming back because the business is here. So interesting, really, really interesting. Yeah, so this year we're looking at buying something maybe in Portugal or America or something like this to do something. Because again, I'm a thinker, creating, writing and so forth. So that's really interesting. The funny thing is, the busier you are here, the quicker the time goes.
Yeah, so quick. I mean, it's nearly the end of the year again, Dariush.
Exactly.
Where did it go? Where did January to November go? It's amazing. You're right. The busier you are, the faster time goes. And I travel a lot as well, a huge amount. I feel like I'm on a plane more than I'm off. And whole weeks disappear into airports in this weird time.
It's true.
This weird time in between. I went to India last week and I went to Jaipur. And Kuala Lumpur to Jaipur, I couldn't fly direct. So I had to do 3 flights to get there. Door to door, it took me 24 hours. And somehow when I got to the hotel in Jaipur, I was like, I just missed Monday.
Whole day. Yes.
It's gone. It's like a time lapse when you're in the air. So I resonate with that a lot, that the more you do, the quicker time goes.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to come to your journey now. So if you don't mind, just share your journey with us from wherever you want to start to where we are today, please.
Gosh, it's been an amazing journey. Let's start in Dubai, given that's where you are. So I moved to Dubai in 2018, and I came to take over.
From the UK?
No. I haven't lived in the UK for 18 years. I came from South Africa.
Okay.
That had been my job previous to Dubai, but before that I had been in Hong Kong for a few years, Singapore for a few years, South Africa for 7 years.
So what was your experience in Hong Kong and South Africa?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, that's part of the reason I'm back in Asia now.
Your work experience, was it what was it? What was your...
I was always in marketing. So I have actually two sides of me. I have this business that we're predominantly talking about today, which is a platform which is called Empathy Everywhere, which is my commitment to create more empathy in the workplace, in the world. But I also have a branding agency, and the branding agency comes from a 18-year career in marketing and advertising.
Right.
And that career took me around the world. So I started in London. As you mentioned, I am British originally. So I started in London, but I left very young in my early 20s, and I never went back. I never went back.
Did you leave
to
by
the UK.
yourself, or you left with a family?
No, I left by myself then.
That's amazing. That's amazing. For a young lady to go to a foreign country and set up from scratch.
Yeah, and it never ended. So I more or less every 3 years for about 17, 18 years now I've moved. Nearly always on my own, or more recently I have a little girl, she's 6.5, so more recently with her, but I was a single mum as well, so her and I just traveled the world together as well.
So it hasn't stopped you?
Say that again.
It hasn't stopped you?
Oh gosh, no, she hasn't stopped me. No, she's
Not
like
she,
a little...
the circumstances. No, I children inspire you, right? No, I'm just saying, you didn't think, oh, I'm a single mom now, I'm just going to stay in one place. You've continued to... Amazing. No,
I mean, people ask me all the time, even now, people say, how do you do it? You know, where do you get your energy from? Because as I said, last week I went into India. It ended up with 12 flights in 7 days last week. So I did Kuala Lumpur, Thailand, India, Sri Lanka, Kuala Lumpur in 7 days. And I thrive on it. But everybody else is like, number one, where are you now? And number two, how do you keep going? But to your point earlier about the busier you are, the faster time goes, I believe that the more passionate you are about things, the more time you create. Because people use time, I'm not going to say as an excuse, but as a maybe rationale for why they don't get to things. But in all honesty, Darius, I never run out of time, right? I say yes to everything, nearly everything, as long as it aligns with the vision and values of what we're trying to do as a platform. I very rarely say no. But the more I say yes to, the more I manage to do. So I'm a believer that you create time. I think it's quite magical, really. But that's what I've been doing.
At such a young age. Congratulations. So you were in marketing. You came to Dubai 2018.
Yep, I came to Dubai 2018. I was a regional CEO in an ad agency for a very large corporate global business with an arm in Dubai. And let's just say that the business I took over wasn't quite what I expected at the time. And I was thrown really from very corporate advertising where there's, 17 people in finance and 15 people in global HR to pretty much becoming an entrepreneur. So whilst it was within a larger, bigger business, as often is the case in Dubai, or particularly then, it's changed quite a bit in the last couple of years, we were really like an outpost. We carried the global brand, but it was a locally run shop, really. So I became an entrepreneur overnight of a failing business, and I had absolutely no idea how to be an entrepreneur. As I said, I had a team of X number of people in finance. I hadn't had to do my own P&Ls. And I had no network at that time. I didn't know anyone in Dubai, and I was a single mum. So it was a very overwhelming time. I had no idea what I was doing. But what I did know was that if I focused on my people, whether that was my team or my clients, suppliers, supporters, anybody, people, humans, that we could turn things around, because people are amazing, right? If you invest into people, you can do miraculous things. So that's what I did. And in that process, I remember it so clearly. It was Ramadan. It was really hot. I remember that year it was like 50 degrees. And I went for lunch with a business coach. And I asked this woman, like, what on earth is going on in this city? And it was really different. It's phenomenal how much Dubai has changed between 2018 and nearly 2024. And she asked me in that lunch about my leadership style. And I said to her, I run everything with intuition. So I intuitively lean into people and work with people. And she stopped me and she said, is it intuition or is it empathy? And I was like, no, it's not empathy. Like, what's empathy got to do with me or business? But I went away, Darius, and I started to research it. And I discovered, I mean, we can talk about it today if you'd like, but I discovered something called the empathy deficit, which is the lack of connection, the lack of understanding in our world. And fundamentally, from that moment on, my life changed. I started to write about that, not because I was writing a book. Like, I was never one of those people that was like, I'm going to become an author. But I started to write. And that was 2019. And by the end of that year, I had a book deal, and 2020 changed the world in many ways. So that's how we got here.
Thank you. So the advertising business, you left it, or it shut down? Because you had, I guess it was just before COVID, right?
Yes. No, I didn't. So I'm the queen of multitasking, I think. So I carried on. We turned around that business. I did it for 3 years. And by 2021, that turnaround was done. We were a thriving business. We had won awards and clients. We worked with really big clients across Dubai, Emirates and MetLife Insurance, big global business. And at that point, I think you asked me earlier about being brave. I made what, when I look back now, I think was a really brave decision. But at the time I didn't feel brave. But I decided to leave the corporate world and focus on this empathy work, because I was working like 20 hours a day, trying to run my business in Dubai in working hours, and then working with the media and everybody else that was interested in this empathy space, in between. And I was a single mum. And at that time I had a baby. She was like between 1 and 3 in those years. So I decided, you know what? I believe in this work so much that I will leave the corporate world and, get this, I will leave Dubai and move to Sri Lanka all alone with my daughter. I had never even been on vacation, but I'm going to move to a tropical island all on my own in the middle of a global pandemic and run my business virtually from there. So that's what we did. Me and my little girl, we left everything we knew in Dubai, left the corporate world and set up Empathy Everywhere from Sri Lanka. And that was the beginning of a new chapter.
So why did you leave Colombo and go to Malaysia?
Well, I always remember when I was leaving Dubai, a businessman I know well said to me, why on earth would you do this? You are on such a roll. Why would you move to an island, like when you're busy building an empire? And I remember saying to him, well, how hard can it be to live on a tropical island? That was March 2021. And we believed that COVID was sort of over-ish by then. And the plan was to move to Colombo and, be able to run a business in the city and commute and all of those things. However, I don't know if you know anything about Sri Lanka, but in the years of 2021 and 2022, not only did it succumb to a second and third very difficult phase of COVID, which resulted in lockdowns, which they hadn't had actually in the first wave when the rest of the world was locked down. But the country collapsed as well. So we had a social, economical and political collapse. So by mid-2022, we had no power, no fuel, as in literally no petrol for the cars on the streets. We had no power, sometimes as in electricity for 14 or 16 hours a day. There was huge food shortages and the hospitals ran out of medicine. So it became a very interesting experience, one that one day I'll write about. But it was not conducive to running a predominantly virtual global business. I couldn't get my daughter to school. I couldn't get her back from school because there was no cars, there was no petrol. I would be talking to someone like you and the power would go. And even if the power stayed on, I would have no air conditioning. So I was like in the tropics trying to, run a business. So it wasn't conducive to the speed with which empathy as a skill set and as an interest set was growing in the world. So last summer, we decided to move to Kuala Lumpur, which is only a 3.5-hour flight. And now I commute between the two, because what I had managed to do in Sri Lanka is build a network and a base and a home. I mean, I'm still very much at home there. And now I do lots of work there. So I commute between the two, but at least I have air conditioning, power, and a Wi-Fi
some
connection.
Consistency.
And my daughter's in school, so
That's
progress.
Beautiful story. I noticed not 1 ounce of negativity comes out of your mouth. There's no regrets, no nothing. Challenges are brought and you just face them and overcome them. And we're going to go into these challenges. But before that, I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind, you said that you got a big deal, or you got some traction, right? Whilst you were thinking about leaving your position in the marketing company, in the branding company. What was that eureka moment? What happened? Because I'm a salesman, and nobody wakes up in the morning thinking, I'm going to spend some money on empathy division or empathy coaching, or everybody spends money on sales, marketing. So what was it that triggered you to think, hang on, I love the way you say global business, global empire. I love those words, right? But then nobody wakes up in the morning thinking, I'm going to spend some money on empathy. Right. So.
Well, that's true. And I'm gonna answer your question with a story that happened literally last week. I have a colleague in India who I met in Dubai, who I often meet at GITEX every year because I do some work at GITEX. And he is running a small, growing marketing business. We're in touch on Instagram. And he was asking me last week about my social content and how I keep up with it, and all those questions that all entrepreneurs have, which is how on earth do we manage this 24/7 job, which is social media, and the associated costs with that, because as you know, it costs money, right? Every edit, like we were talking about before we came on air, managing platforms and responding to requests and all that stuff, right? The busier you get as an entrepreneur, the more you spend both time and money on building your social footprint. And I said to him, he asked me, how do you monetize it? And I said, well, I don't. And he was like, sorry, what? Especially because he's Indian, right? So he's like on a track for success, which is why I love working in India. And he was like, sorry, well, I don't understand. And I said, well, I never created Empathy Everywhere to make any money. And he said, you've just blown my mind. Like, I can't even possibly imagine that. So that's the answer, Darius. I never really meant it to make any money. It's great that it does. And the main reason it's great that it does is because it allows me to hire many more people into this business to continue to grow what I believe is a value and a skill set that our world needs now more than ever, right? How are we ever going to overcome the problems of the world if we don't understand each other, if we don't know how to listen? Whether you're talking war and peace or leadership or sales, right? Sales strategy, you have to listen. And we have become terrible listeners in all areas of our lives. So I didn't necessarily have a eureka moment. However, I guess there were a few signs, and I'm a believer that when the universe gives you a sign, you should stop and look at it, listen to it. So the first thing that happened was my book became a bestseller before it went on sale, so in pre-sales. And I didn't think anyone was going to read my book, let alone become a bestseller.
How did people find out about your book? How did it become
I think they found out about it because Dubai is a very small network place. And again, Dubai has grown, right, significantly in the last 3 years since COVID. But it's still a very close connect space. That's exactly how I found you and the work you're doing, right, through friends, through colleagues. So I think people knew what I was doing. They knew that I was writing. And when the book came out, they were very supportive. And they ordered it, right, before it came out. Then I had my first podcast, which was called the Empathy for Breakfast Show. And the Empathy for Breakfast Show was a live show in COVID from my bedroom. Didn't look much different from this, to be honest. And I started talking live every Tuesday morning. And in the end, that show reached 85,000 people. So by the end of 2020, I was pretty sure that there was some value in what I was doing. And it wasn't just me that believed in creating more empathy in the workplace, in leadership, and what has become more and more about the world in the last three years or so. So that was really, I guess, it was never one eureka moment. It was little tiny ones. And I continue to have them. So this year, I did my first event in various countries. So the first client in Europe, flew me to Europe. And so there's another little eureka moment where you realize I'm doing the right thing. and people invite me to host big stages and I had my biggest audience ever. Or, so I believe, Darius, you have to look for those little moments, because if you constantly wait for the one big one, and I'm thrilled for people that have one, you might be waiting a really long time, and then you can get tired. And when people ask me, what's your tips for, success? I think it's two things. I think it's tenacity and resilience. Because, and I'm sure in your space, right, to build platform success, you have to just keep going consistently and not let the bad days or the difficult days or the low cash flow month impact you. If you're constantly waiting for the day I get invited to Oprah, it might take me 10 more years, right? But if I look out for all those small moments in the process, it feeds you, it feeds that energy. So this is one of them, being here with you and talking about this.
Thank you so much. I have so many questions to ask you. So what was the title of your book?
The title of my book is Softening the Edge. I've got it here, actually. There it is.
Softening the Edge. Okay, I'm going to get it. Where can I buy it from?
Anywhere in Dubai, but the easiest one's Amazon.
Okay, fantastic, done. So it's on the bookshelves right now?
It is.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic. I'll go looking for it. Thank you, Mimi. Yeah. Do you mind if I ask how many copies you sold?
I don't mind, but I don't know the answer.
Do you make any money out of the books?
Yeah, I don't know. I would say a couple of thousand by now. But because I'm not driven by money or data, and there's two reasons for that. One, I think I would find it intimidating. So if I do need to grow up a bit and probably get a finance director in my business. But for me, because I'm not a salesperson like you, if I focus too much on the data or the numbers, I find it stressful for me. Again, it stops my creativity, right? So if I spend too much time looking at my social media analytics and analyzing why this video got X thousand and that one didn't, I find it too much. It stops me. It slows me down. So on the one hand, I don't do that. And on the other hand, I believe that these things like books, like shows, whatever it is, go exactly where they're meant to go. So if I do a live talk, for example, and 5 people come, or 55 or 500, I do exactly the same thing regardless, right? Because I believe that the people that are in the room, or the people that buy your book, are the people that are meant to today. Today, you cross paths for a reason. So I know I should be better at this going forwards, but I think that I'm very intentional about keeping this platform and my work driven by passion, driven by a desire. This sounds so stereotypical, but I truly mean it, to make the world a better place. I really believe that if we can listen to each other more, if we can teach our children as well, but if we can teach our workplaces to hear each other, to connect more, to understand more, to overcome judgment and bias, we will significantly shift the way we work, but also the performance. So this work in empathy and understanding, in what I call listening-led leadership, sits perfectly in the middle of wellness, humans, and profitability. So I talk about where humanism meets capitalism and balancing the two. I'm
going to zoom in on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because a lot of our viewers and listeners are entrepreneurs, okay? And I believe self-worth dictates a lot of your success. In my opinion. So when you are the brand, it is your message, it's your initiative, then you have to go into the capitalist side and charge for it. Okay? If you are not that money driven, do you feel sometimes you charge too little? Do you have this internal dialogue going, is that maybe I'm being too passionate, I'm not being commercial enough? Or do you just leave the commercial side to take care of itself? Or are you just letting the universe take care of it?
I think it's both. So the work that I do that's paid pays very well. So the people that I know can afford to pay for it, I charge them, right? So when the corporates ask me to fly to Belgium, I mentioned earlier, then I make money, proper money, right? Because I know that they can afford it, right? They're a big global brand. They can afford to fly me there and to pay me and cover my time and all the things that I give them. I agree with your point around self-worth, because I think for me, I get better at that all the time. Not every day, but I get better and better at acknowledging that. So yes, I do believe that we have to charge our worth and charge it where the people are that can pay. But on the other side, what I also knew for the first 3 years of this journey, and now I'm in 4, is that I had to create impact before I could seek value. And that's the case. So I just finished yesterday making my new show reel or speaker reel, like a small video that pulls together what I've done. And when I look at that, even for me, I'm like, holy maloney, I've done a lot, right? So when I show that to clients now, they think that too. They're like, gosh, this woman's all around the world, right? She's everywhere. You look at my client list, it's every client you can name, Emirates, Coca-Cola, Unilever, I mean, governments, it's all there. Now, did I charge for all of it? No. But that doesn't matter today because now I can use that to charge for different things in the future. Mm-hmm. So the one thing I disagree with in the social media universe of personal branding is that everybody tells me that if you don't charge for things, there's no value. I think, Dariush, we say that to ourselves. And I understand why. I empathize with why. Because being a thought leader or a social content creator or an influencer or whatever you want to call it, A, it's very lonely, and B, it's very expensive. So I understand why we have to reassure ourselves that if I don't charge for my time, nobody will value me. But I don't agree it's true because I do lots of work without charge and I know that there is value connected to it and it comes back in different money later. So in the end, the cycle continues. As I said, we make money. We have a team of 9. So we're making money, but it's just about how you get to it.
I totally agree with you. I think, by the way, can you hear me okay?
You're a little quiet, but yes,
okay,
I can.
I'll get
I
this
can
microphone a little bit closer to me. What I find is that if people don't pay, they don't pay attention. Mm-hmm. So I've been giving content out for over 10 years without pay, and I lose every month. I don't have a product to sell. I have nothing to. It's just contributing. But I do know when people come to my courses, if they don't pay attention. They don't value it. So, and I always thought, is this internal dialogue? I should charge more. I know how much value I'm getting. So we're all work in progress.
Yeah.
Now,
it's a balance.
Now, let's say can you give me an elevator pitch?
Or what we do.
What you do.
What the platform does or what I do.
What you do, and then we're going to talk about the platform. The reason for that is because I'm going to, if you don't mind, I have some thoughts about empathy. Okay. And I think, in my humble opinion, we're going to have this discussion after you've done your pitch, is that to be successful, you need a balance of empathy and confidence. Or if you're too confident, and that's my opinion, and I'd love you to challenge me if you wish. If you're too confident, you come across as arrogant. And maybe I may not even be using the right terminology. But I think if you got too much empathy, you could potentially get walked all over. So let's have this conversation after your elevator pitch, please. Yeah.
So, by the way, your assumptions are the same all across Asia. So just to justify that, or acknowledge it, I should say, everything you just said is what I hear all the time. So you are not alone in those opinions. But my elevator pitch would be, my name's Mimi Nicklin, and I'm a best-selling author and a podcaster, and I get up every day to create more empathy in the world. Because I believe that the significant issues that we're facing in both the corporate and social universe around us relies upon us closing the gaps and being able to understand each other both in a business and a global context in order to progress together and balance humanism and capitalism more successfully for shared growth, whether that's human or organizational. I made that up on the spot, but it sounded good.
It sounded good, yeah. It opens doors for more questions. So here goes my questions. If an organization has too much empathy, my fear is that we will lose the assertiveness. We will lose direction. We'll go soft.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Yeah, it's a very common misconception because many people believe that empathy is an emotion, but the reality is that empathy is a skill set. So empathy is built into your prefrontal cortex. Every human, or nearly every human, is born with it. It is a pro-social, pro-evolutionary skill set. So empathy is fundamentally about perspective taking. So in that case, empathy becomes your human data set in an organization. So as a leader, to use your empathy is to be able to understand the people around you, whether that's suppliers, partners, employees, other members of the board. So you are using that skill set to be able to take their perspective. Why are they saying what they're saying? Why do they want a reduction in price? Why are they finishing the contract when we've been together for 20 years? Why is my employee not getting deadlines created on time? Why are they turning up late? Why are they no longer a high performer in my team, right? So these are critical pieces of data that help you understand your business. That's why I talk about balancing humanism with capitalism, because fundamentally, even if you have a production line, we need our people, right? Businesses are made up of people. The other thing to know is that when you use empathy effectively and efficiently, it's never ever about being soft. There is nothing soft about empathy. It's hard to find, hard to master, and hard to maintain. So that assumption that you mentioned there, Darius, which many people in senior leadership positions carry, which is if I use my empathy, somebody will walk all over me or they'll exploit it. What you're actually referring to, I believe, is either kindness, compassion, or sympathy, but never empathy. Because empathy is the skill set, not an emotion.
So, okay, that's really interesting. So empathy is the skill set to understand people.
Yeah, perspective taking.
Maybe we don't understand the word empathy well, right? So
yeah, absolutely. This is why I do this every day. Most people think that empathy has something to do with being kind. So what I always say to my audience is please be kind. We need more kind people, but it's got nothing to do with empathy. You can use empathy and not be kind. To be kind is a choice, right? It's a personality choice. It's a way you act. It's a value. But to empathize is a skill set. So those are two very different things.
Okay. Can you share some of those skill sets with us?
What, empathetic skill sets?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, the fundamental one I've touched on already a couple of times as I've been speaking is listening. So to create empathy, to have a perspective on something, you need to be curious. You need to understand. And the way to get to that is through listening. Okay, so whether you are in sales or C-suite leadership or marketing or wherever you sit, maybe you're in a startup, your superpower is the ability to listen to people. So fundamentally, the backbone to all empathy is listening, is being able to hear people, right? So that you can step into their world, so that you can understand the behavior or the challenge. I do a lot in conflict management. Why are you facing this conflict? What is this conflict really about? So listening is your core pillar. Within listening, of course, there are various parts of that. Some of it comes to the functional reality of being able to listen to people. So being able to actually hear what they're saying and not letting your mind wonder off to what time you're picking up the kids and have you fed the cat or whether you've completed the P&L. But also things like body language, eye contact, the ability to create safe spaces. So you hear a lot about psychological safety today. They're very intertwined. If you want to create a space where people feel able to speak so that you can listen, right? Because you have to have someone speaking to listen. You need a certain level of what we call safety in the workplace. That fundamentally means a leadership style that is open to people being able to express themselves, to share why, to challenge, to share why things should work, or ideas might be different, to innovate, to design. When people feel seen and heard, which is fundamental to being a human being, right? So we know this when two babies are born equally sick, the one that is seen more by humans, the one that gets more empathy will survive longer. To be empathized with literally creates longevity. You will live longer when there's more empathy. You also have high levels of immunity, lower levels of heart disease and other associated diseases. So when people in the workplace feel seen and heard, they have less stress in the brain, right? The brain responds differently. When that happens, we have lower levels of adrenaline and cortisol in the bloodstream. When you can suppress the adrenaline and the cortisol, people can reach peak performance. They can sell better, create better, innovate more, challenge, converse, create motivation. So fundamentally, that connection between listening to someone and their performance is a direct line.
Wow. Thank you. How is there a skill set in somebody focused? To me, I've always done well because I have a childlike enthusiasm to know more about the person sitting in front of me. I really do. That's why I enjoy doing podcasts, because I'm really intrigued and I want to know your history and what motivates you, what drives you, what's your unique selling proposition, what value you bring in. Is listening skills something that you can teach, or is it within you to stay enthusiastic and not your mind thinking about something else, wandering off? Is that something we could teach?
Yeah, it's definitely a skill set. And it's one that you have to practice. So actually the last 3 words of my book are practice creates permanence, right? Because with any skill set, the more you do it, the more permanent it becomes, the better at it you become. Also, the faster at it you become. So there is one of the big pushbacks I get from leaders is, Mimi, I don't have time. I don't have time to listen to people. But what I always say to them is the better you get at listening, two things happen. The quicker you get at hearing the information you need, but also the quicker your team gets at communicating the information that they want you to hear, right? So it's a practicable skill. It's also a teachable skill. So with children, little children, we spend our time telling them to listen, right? Listen to mummy, listen to teacher, listen to auntie, right? Then they grow up and we stop. We stop telling them the whole time. We don't teach it in school. We don't teach it in university. And more often than not, although it's changing, we don't teach it in the workplace, right? So to listen is an active skill. You have to be conscious about it, right? So there's two enemies to high empathy, to high listening. One is low time and the other is high stress. And if I asked our audience today to put their hand up in their room, wherever they're listening to this, do you suffer with low time and high stress? I would guess that like 98% of your podcast viewers are going to say yes, right? Because I know that because I ask this to every audience around the world every week. So in an environment where we are low on time and high on stress, to be able to listen, whether that's in the workplace or to your children, right, or to your community, you have to be active. You have to make a decision to listen. You have to stop. You have to make eye contact. You have to hear what they're saying. You have to stop judging. You have to stop assuming you know the answer. The data shows that the more senior we become, the worse listeners we become, the less empathetic we are.
Because they think they have less time. They got other important things to do.
Less time, ego, I'm more important than this conversation. But also, and it's quite fair, they think they know the answer, and probably they do. Okay. So when one of my account managers comes to me and says, hey, Mimi, can I talk through this problem because the client's changed the timing plan? Do I know the answer? Yes, I knew the answer at the first 6 words because it's probably the 107th account manager in my career to ask me this, right? But that's not the point, right? Because she's not coming to me for me to solve it. My role as a leader is to enable her to solve it. So that's what I do. I say, okay, so tell me what happened. And then I ask her questions. How did that happen? Why is the client doing that? Why do you think they've changed the timeline? What changed between Friday and Monday? And the amazing thing is 5, 6, 7 minutes later, they go, oh, yeah, no problem. I'm going to fix it. Thanks, Mimi. You're great. Yeah, thanks. You know, and they leave, and I think I did absolutely nothing.
They had all the
but
answers.
They leave feeling a change, right? So assumption gets in the way, and sometimes that's accurate assumption. Could I have solved it quicker? Possibly, but that's not my job. It's her job.
Wow. And then I guess that way it stops the bottleneck, right? If people, I'll call it monkeys on the back, right? So you're just throwing the monkeys on their back and not taking theirs and fixing everybody else's problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you watched the program The Apprentice?
Oh, gosh, like a million years ago, but yes.
Okay. They don't have much empathy in their programs. And I think that it shows a wrong side of the corporate or the capital world where there are people backstabbing, it's all result driven, not how to build a team. How do you feel when you're watching programs like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just reconfirms the empathy deficit that we're living within. There's a reason for the way those leaders have ended up, and a lot of it's to do with how they grew up and the years that they grew up in. If we look particularly at the West, because I can't, represent the whole world, but if you look at the West, so predominantly Europe and the Americas in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, right? They were boom years. So everybody was so busy performing, so busy producing. We were creating capitalism, we're creating consumerism, right? We created and launched more products, consumed more products in those 30 years than at any other time in history before that, right? So we were so busy on the rat race, on that treadmill of growth, that those leaders that are today, probably in their 50s and 60s and leading organizations, they never got taught any of this. Nobody ever stopped to tell them, maybe you should listen to other people, or maybe you should share opinions or co-create or collaborate, right? That just wasn't the capitalist world that we were running businesses in. And of course, that has significantly shifted today for many reasons, which we can talk about if we want to. So I think those leaders have ended up in that position because of how they were, I say brought up, I mean in the workplace, right? How they grew up in that space. But the world has changed. The empathy deficit was first coined by Barack Obama in 2006. So before he was president, he stood up and he said to his audience, I know I'm here to talk about the federal deficit, but I think we should talk about our empathy deficit. Okay? Wow. So that was like 17 years ago. We did very little about it since then, but he recognized that. He recognized that this lack of understanding is going to significantly impact the cohesion of our businesses and world. And he was right, because look what's happened, right? Again, whether you look at war and peace or leadership or family structure, right? Darius, we're living with a loneliness epidemic. So statistically, 52% of the planet is lonely. That's 3.5 billion people. And if you listen to the Surgeon General of the US in July, what he told us was that loneliness is now the highest burden on our healthcare system worldwide. And it is as dangerous to you as smoking 7 cigarettes per half day. So 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
Okay? So to be lonely is as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. This is a huge burden on the human race, right? COVID, of course, fast-tracked a whole load of things. But what we've seen in markets like the US, 42% of the corporate world has left the corporate world in the last 4 years. Okay, burnout higher than ever, 400 million people with depression. Okay, so we have significant social issues in our world that are obviously not only from a lack of empathy, but are coming from that segregation, isolation, loneliness, bullying, judgment, stereotypes, all of the isms, right? So when empathy is low, the isms are high: racism, sexism, ageism, nationalism, ableism, whatever it is. And that's what we're seeing in our world today. So when I look at those leaders, I think that they are a product of our past for very valid reasons, but that we need to shift it immediately if we're going to protect the future.
So the shift is happening because you're busy. So what is it that you think that your clients or prospects are noticing that they call it? Because probably in the 80s, like you said, you wouldn't be that busy. The shift is happening now.
Yeah.
What's caused that shift, do you think? And where in the world these leaders are calling you saying, Mimi, come in, help?
I think it's a few things. I think I wouldn't have had this business in the 80s, but I probably wouldn't have had this business in the late 2000 and teens either. So prior to 2020. I'll tell you again a little story, Darius. When I got my book deal, I called my mum. She's very British, my mum. And I called her and I was like, Mum, you're never going to guess what? I've got a book deal. And she said to me, darling, that's wonderful, but who wants to read a book about empathy? Right? And I was like, thanks for the support, Mum. But she was right.
Thanks for the
in
empathy.
2019, nobody was talking about this, Darius,
Yeah,
right? But a couple of things happened. Well, a lot has happened, but a couple of things happened that year. So, of course, COVID was one of them. So everything that comes with that, the segregation, the isolation, the reframing of the value of life, the perception of control, because until then we all thought we had control over our lives, and what 2020 showed us is none of us have any control over our lives. So that changed a lot of people's behavior. But other things happened. So in June and November, there were 18 social movements of a large scale in the US, which started with Black Lives Matter, but there were then, many, many more, and they spread all around the world. So in these years, there have been fundamental shifts to our awareness, to the way we live, to the way we work, to our decisions. And I believe most of them are being driven by fear. We are living in a perpetual state of fear, although most of that is subconscious. It's not like you and I go to work every day scared, right? But, every time you turn on the news, there's another bad news or atrocity or trouble that you have no control over fixing. And the reality is, my mum says to me, my mum's come up twice now in 5 minutes, but she says, will you stop worrying about it? Because you can't fix it. But it's a very previous generation thought, because they didn't grow up in a world where they had to watch it, right? For us, whether it's the Great Resignation or it's violence or whatever it is, we're watching it live. And however much we dislike it or don't want it, we have no impact on it. So what that's done is it's changed the way we work and see leadership. It's changed the way that we expect work to respond to us. It's changed the way that your employees or staff come into the office, because they need different things from you now. They're not living in a harmonious, consistent, money-filled wheel, right? So they need different things. They're more fragile for great reason. But also the younger ones are demanding it. So if you imagine being 18 or 19 today, and the world that they have watched on, multicolored LED screens for their whole lives, when you ask them, they blame us entirely, and probably so they should, right? So they look at us, Darius and Mimi, and they go, you guys messed it up. How could you let this happen? How did you create a world where, the forests are burning down and the most beautiful animals are extinct and we're killing each other and there's a rape every X seconds in many countries around the world, and hate speech reigns supreme, and the politicians are all corrupt, they look at us and they're like, what did you do? I think we all look at each other and say, what did we do as well? But because of that, they're coming into the workplace like, clearly you guys don't have any idea, leave it to us. Right? We will do this differently. We don't want to be you. We don't want to be burnt out. We don't want the second biggest killer of our youth to be suicide. We don't want any of that, because of course nobody would when you're 18. So as they come into the workplace, they are demanding that we see them, that we change things, that we do things differently, that we know their names, right? Which the previous generation didn't enforce, but this generation will, and they'll vote with their feet. So I always say to the leaders that I speak to, change is not a choice, right? It's omnipresent. Mm-hmm. So we have to work out, even if you don't like it and you don't understand them, you have to work out how to communicate with this younger generation, because they're the ones that are going to be here to try and fix all of this.
Absolutely. A couple of more things I'd like to share with you and get your feedback. Some of the things I say is that, when you're listening to someone, and you have heard it before, like for instance, you can come across someone who has a defeatist mentality, like I'm a victim, this has happened to me. And often positive people tend to stop them and say, no, come on, get positive. Okay. Or have too much empathy. There's the words I'm using, which is probably a wrong word. You're going to correct me. Is that they feel that they understand, but yet they feel the pain they're going through. Mm. Now, what I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you are understanding and feeling their pain, you might go there with them. Mm. Does that make sense? Like, I can't think about work. I can't go selling. I can't, because at home I'm this. They go, really? Oh, poor you. And they suddenly, both of them are in the victim mentality. Mm. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Mm. So what I often say is understand, but you don't have to live what they're going through, or you don't have to feel what they're going through. Correct me.
No, I don't need to correct you. I think it's absolutely. No, listen, I'm totally in agreement. I think you have to be able to find the balance between understanding and perspective taking and feeling, right? I, for example, many years ago now, about 8 years ago, 10 maybe, stopped listening to the news. And I remember a leader at the time saying to me, you can't be in the business community and not watch the news. And I said to him, I can't be in the business community and watch the news, right? Because I am a feeler, right? When I watch starving children or any of these things, like I just want to cry with them, So if I absorb that all the time, I would never do any work, right? So when you meet people who are what they say are self-professed, highly empathetic people, that's what they will tell you. They will tell you that it is paralyzing to them, that they take on the emotions of the world and then they can't do anything. And that's no good to anyone, but it's also no way to live a career or build a business. So I'm totally in agreement with you. I think the critical leadership skill here is to be able to lean in, to listen, to make people feel seen and heard, to acknowledge. And I often say, Darius, acknowledge over act. Acknowledgement over action. Okay. Acknowledge their reality. But as you said, we have a business to run, right? We have solutions to find. My job as a leader is to empower you to do that, to find the best way. So help me understand. Help me understand why you can't do this. Once I have that data set, that empathy, then I can help you fix it. Right. So I'm absolutely in agreement with you. You can't feel the emotions of everybody all day, every day, because no human can take that on.
Beautiful. Do you mind if I ask you a personal question?
Oh, it depends what it is.
It's about being a single mum.
Go ahead.
You're not going to be short of men. Do you think you choose to be a single mum? Have you set the bar so high that you're looking for a man with so much empathy? Does that make sense? And do you feel like your daughter needs a man, or you think, no, hang on, it has to be the right person? So many questions. But you're in the business of empathy. I would have thought you'll have like cues of, you can pick and choose, right?
Well, the short answer is I'm actually no longer a single mum. So I do have a partner now. We've been together 2 years.
Okay. So tell me, is he got sympathy? Does he listen to you? Did he have it before he came into the relationship?
I think it's, I think probably, and I'll answer it more from my daughter's point of view than his.
Please.
I think that when you live with someone that is so passionate about anything, you can't help but be involved in it, right? So if you are married to or in a relationship with someone that's mad about scuba diving, you're going to absorb that, right? Because you're going to scuba dive on holiday, or you're going to watch them in scuba diving competitions, or whatever it is, right? So I think by absorption, the family around me are very aware of these skill sets and how important it is to listen and all of these types of things. But I don't think that changes who I was looking for kind of in a romantic partner or in a life partner for me. I think for me, the more important thing was somebody that understood me, which, yes, I mean, of course, that is empathy, but I'm not looking for an empathetic human necessarily. I'm just looking for somebody that gets me, right? Somebody that says, I understand you're working these hours, or I understand why it's important to you to write a second book or get on a plane to India on a Tuesday, or, you know, all of these things that I'm passionate about. So I think, Darius, that I was looking for someone with understanding, because I have a child, I have a career, I have books and podcasts and all these things, right? It's a lot to balance. So you have to find someone that matches that frequency, either because they are equally busy or because they're not and they appreciate that you are, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't think I would filter my friends or my relationships through looking for empathetic people, but I think that all of us are looking for people that understand us, because that is the secret to friendship, right? You have to have people that understand you.
That's really, really, really good point. I'm sure you're familiar with Andrew Tate. Okay. Is he a misogynist? Sometimes he said things that sound that way. Now, I believe, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is that to be an alpha male, you don't have to be an obnoxious so-and-so. You know, you can have empathy and be an alpha male. Because a lot of, from men's point of view, some men think that if they are too empathetic, they lose their manhood, their manliness, the alpha male side. And I think men are going through massive change right now. So what's your opinion about that? Because you can be an alpha male, you can be strong, you can be a man, yet have empathy, right? It doesn't show softness.
It's got nothing to do with softness. So in fact, I would say 90, maybe more than 90% of my clients are men, right? So I spend my entire working life with male leaders, on the whole, very few female leaders really. So number one, the people that are respecting this and valuing it and paying for it and building into their businesses are very strong men, male leaders, right? But also way beyond my tiny little ecosystem, if you look at the men that are leading in this space, they are also very strong male, masculine men, right? So probably the father of empathy in the workplace is Satya Nadella, who is the CEO and chairman of Microsoft, right? So he turned around that business, and this is not a easy or small business to turn around, returned $1 trillion to his shareholders, right? So he's often been awarded as the best or leading CEO in the world. You know, many awards rating him the best in the world. So no, to be a strong male leader relies on empathy. Okay, again, I want to be really clear to all of the male leaders out there. This is nothing to do with being sympathy or soft or kind or gentle. Okay, those are choices, those are actions, right? And that's up to every leader to do. But the act of understanding people, if you want to know why your 20-year supplier has decided to go to your competitor and you want to turn it around, your empathy is what will allow you to do it, right? Step into their shoes and work out why, what happened or what is happening. That is empathy. In fact, in my book, and I'm not talking about it to promote the book, but there's two, because I knew this insight existed, Darius, and you sort of perfectly articulated it. I talk about two organizations that are the most extreme masculine organizations in the world that use empathy. The first is the US Army. So the biggest army in the world, who are literally at a time, going into war zones, the most violent, aggressive masculine environments. Their soldiers have to master empathy. It's in their toolbox. It's in their training manual. Okay, to be a soldier on the front line with the US Army, they have to undergo empathy training. The second, and I use it all the time in my workshops, is the FBI. So the FBI, who spend a lot of time obviously working with terrorism and hostage situations, they have something called the behavioral change stairway, which I train a lot. And the behavioral change stairway is what they use with hostages to get people to, let the hostages go without killing everyone, right? So to manage the most conflicted, aggressive environments. And the second point of that behavioral change stairway, well before you impact anything, is empathy, right? So in these very masculine, very aggressive, very hard-edged environments, these huge organizations who are leading the world are training their staff in listening. So yeah, to any man out there that prior to this podcast thought empathy was a soft skill, maybe I've convinced you otherwise.
Wonderful. Thank you. In an organization where, someone says, you walk in, you're new to the organization, and so I've heard this before, this has happened before, and there's a lot of negativity, and then they hire you. Okay. And how does it work? You come, you do a seminar. Does your system, I know you have the app now, we're going to discuss that. Do you have courses that people go on? Because it takes time to change a culture in an organization, true?
Yeah, it absolutely does. So the work we're focusing on, at least right now in the current, is around awareness shift. Because you're right, to change culture would need a different business than I am or have today, right? Because you need people to really go in and work with culture over time. So our work is in two things. We drive a lot of awareness around why and why now. So what is it you should be doing differently, and why is that perhaps limiting you in your current reality, right? That is normally provoked by an issue. I would say the two largest ones. One is multi-generational workplaces. So senior leaders who feel that they can't understand or communicate properly with the younger generations. The second is conflict. So we do quite a lot of conflict training, whether that's internal or external. So for recently, I worked with some bank branches who are not able to manage conflict with their customers, right? And so they're losing customers. So we go in, we do a mixture of keynotes and workshops and different forms of content that take teams through, often nearly always leadership teams, through anywhere from like a 2-hour to 3-day workshop on fundamentally what is communication skills, right? Communication, team building, understanding, filling in gaps, psychological safety, openness, conflict. So, and normally the feedback I get, which used to really offend me, but it doesn't anymore, was, we've heard all this before, but we feel differently now. Because this is not rocket science. We're not teaching people to code, right? We're just teaching them to listen. And so much of that is around time, context, energy in the room, and just saying, hey, have you said thank you to anyone like in the last year? And you'll be amazed how many leaders say,
I believe it.
I don't think I can't have.
It's not such a painful thing to say thank you or acknowledge. It's crazy. So I call it simple manners, but anyway. You say you use the word we. So tell me about your company. Tell me about who's we apart from yourself.
Yeah, we have a team of 9 now. So we just recently founded our Empathy Everywhere Academy, which has a head of coaching. So we just brought on a head of coaching who's going to lead all of this rollout, because like all entrepreneurs, my biggest challenge is time, because I can't be on stage in New York and London and Belgium all at the same time, right? So again, like all entrepreneurs, I've got to that point where I have to stop doing everything myself. So we have to systemize some of this learning and training so that we can reach more people, right? If the goal is to create empathy everywhere, we need different ways to reach everywhere, because it can't all sit on me. So we now have the academy, which will open in January, will predominantly be online and run by our head of coaching. And then we have another set of people who are sitting between Sri Lanka and Dubai, who are the force behind all of the content, because fundamentally the shift in mindset has to come from content, right? So we have the podcast, we have the second book, we have a whole host of social media content, ebooks and courses, all kinds of different pieces that are going out there to change the face of the world. And then I have another one team member that works with me on the corporate side. So she helps me with clients and meetings and agendas and workshops. So there's 9 of us. And we have, I was going to say 11, but there's 9 permanent people working on this. And then we have partners. So I have partners in Dubai, I have partners in India, I have partners in Singapore who help me with clients and leads and putting 2 and 2 together.
Does it take a long time to train your trainers?
It has, yes, but it's speeding up now. I think it's speeding up because we're getting better at it, and we're getting better at, as I said, moving this beyond me. This cannot be about me, right? So of course people follow people. So I'm at peace with that, right? People may come into the business or into the podcast or into the, Instagram page because of me or my name, or they see me on your show and they're like, oh, who's Mimi? But it has to be about more than that, right? So now the training of the trainers is speeding up. It relies on me letting go, right? Because nobody can do it like you can do it because it's yours, right? You're smiling, so I know you get that.
All the time.
But the vision is bigger than, I guess, the ego or the fear of letting go. If you want to scale something, you need more people.
I think it's a fear of the message being diluted. You know, maybe the message cannot be delivered in the same passionate way, so much detail. That's where my fear comes, that I'm going to send somebody who's not a true gladiator.
Yeah.
You know, that's where my fear comes. I share anything, just go out there and do it and touch people in a positive way. But can they be a gladiator? Can they have enough empathy? Can they be passionate about empathy? That's, I think the fear comes from there.
I think the answer is probably no, right? Because nobody can be you.
Exactly.
Right? Nobody can be you. But you can surround, and you have to surround yourself with people that you trust to follow, right? And the world has few leaders and many followers, right? That's how the world works. And I think that it is critical for us as entrepreneurs and thought leaders in the work we're doing to find those people. It won't always work out. It never does, right? But in the end, the damage control I find is always far smaller than the upside. I believe we have to trust our people. We have to trust in people. And they won't ever be you, but they can bring their own flair to the same message.
Beautifully put. Tell me about your app, please.
No, I don't know where we got that from. I don't have an app.
Didn't you say app earlier?
I think I heard you say it just now, and I was like, maybe I invented one.
I'm sure
I must have said something that sounded like that.
No,
but I wish I did have an app.
I think it was me. It was me. So there is no app. So right now, if people want to engage with you, they contact you.
Yes,
Go
please.
On. Please share with us your services. If they want to contact you, they want to use your services for their organization. What's the process? And what happens next? So they
can find me basically on every social media platform at Mimi Nicklin, or they can find my website, www.empathyeverywhere.co. And all of those platforms have obviously either lead forms or direct mails where they can message me. We treat, at least now, every customer and every client independently. So we don't have fit for all products. We have a set of products that we're creating around training and workshops and how we interact with people.
And no apps.
No apps, but we should have an app, and we might have an app.
Maybe it's the universe. Right?
But we will have an online training academy by January. So by January, people will be able to log on and take courses themselves as well as via their employers. Okay. And part of that process is to really formalize our the trainers within the L&D and HR space. So giving organizations the opportunity to train their own L&D or HR teams on, empathetic leadership, empathetic organizational conflict management, that type of thing, get accredited in that. And we're working on that accreditation now, and then use it, to train onwards to their 12,000 people or whatever. Because again, this is an impact game, and impact relies on reach. So we have to empower more people to have
extremely
the skills to train this
scalable
forward.
Yeah. And so if individuals, not necessarily, if individuals for their own personal life, they could use you. Yeah, they could use the services to become better partners. They can. We have a community parents.
Now. Yeah, which we promote again through our other social platforms. It's called Open Room, and Open Room is quite literally an open room. So it's free for all and everyone. It's entirely inclusive. That community exists on WhatsApp and Instagram broadcast currently. And from within that community, there's all kinds of tools for personal growth, right? Whether you are a professional, whether you're a stay-at-home mom or an entrepreneur, we share tools and tips and lessons and webinars and all kinds of things. We're just launching our movie club as well. Ways for people to connect, ways for people to learn, ways for people to grow. And of course, eventually that will link up to the academy as well. So then that community will have the choice to take formal courses, which are accredited online. But if they don't want that, Open Room will always be a series of events and content that people can use for personal growth and for hopefully shifting their mindset and how they're living.
Do you know, one of my questions often to people is, what drives you? And throughout this hour conversation, it's so clear what drives you. It's honestly, it's been an honor It's been an
Thank you.
absolute honor meeting you. Thank you for your time. And I'm going to push your cause to as many people as I come across, because I think you're a force for good. And you're so young and you've achieved so much. Really, really, my hat's off to you. Really amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. And I think thank you never goes unheard, right? It's you don't need to say those things, and it's hugely valuable for me to hear them. And as you know, it can be extremely lonely, right? Leading these causes all alone around the world.
But I've learned so much listening to you in this hour, because I've run companies for like over 30 years, and there are times patience, time, ego, everything gets in the way. And you think every time I actually achieve something is when I show the empathy, right? Something great. And I honor you.
Oh, well, it's been beyond a pleasure. You've totally cheered up my midweek.
Thank
you very much for having me and for everything you're doing to spread so much messaging out there to the world. And hopefully we can stay in touch.
And my love to your beautiful family as well, and your daughter as well, please.
Thank you. Have a lovely day. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And hopefully our paths will cross in Dubai.
Yes, definitely.
Done.
Next time.
I honor you. Thank you, Mimi.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.